Last video I made, I was talking about the origins of the Egyptian and Hebrew languages. This time we're going to talk about the origins of the Hebrew people. To start off, let's look at the etymology of the word Hebrew. From Old French, Hebrew, from Old Latin, Hebraeus, from Greek, Hebraeos, from Aramaic, Semitic, Hebre, corresponding to Hebrew, Ibri, an Israelite. Traditionally from an ancestral name, Eber, but probably literally one from the other side, perhaps in reference to the river Euphrates, or perhaps simply signifying immigrant. From Eber, region on the other or opposite side. There's a word in the Egyptian language that's quite similar to Hebrew, and it means almost the same thing as Eber. That word is Habiru, or Habiru, a designation of a class of people who made their living by hiring themselves out for various services. The term Habiru, meaning outsiders, was applied to nomads, fugitives, bandits, and workers of inferior status. The word is etymologically related to Hebrew. The relationship between the Hyksos and the Hebrews has long been debated. The first appearance of the term Habiru, also Apiru, surfaced in the late 19th century in the cuneiform archive from Egypt known as the Amarna letters. 7 of the letters in the archive are letters of Abdi Habeh, king of Canaanite Jerusalem. A frequent complaint is that Habiru have plundered all the lands of the king, and again, that Habiru have taken the very cities of the king. Abdi Habeh complains that the pharaoh is not sufficiently helpful to him. I am treated like a Habiru. That goes to show you that the Hebrew, or Habiru, were treated much differently than the Canaanite. The Hyksos are thought to have been Semitic, which explains why they would be so open to Canaanites being in the country. Their records show that the Hyksos had Canaanite names like the Hebrews, and their main gods were Canaanite, Baal, and Anath. And those of you who read the Bible know that the Israelites had a problem worshiping the Canaanite gods. They just could not stop worshiping the Canaanite gods. The Genesis story tells us that Joseph's family, Jacob and his other sons and their families, were settled in Goshen. This province was in the Delta area, which history indicates was a herding and grazing area and a flat alluvial plain, not primarily agricultural like the Nile Valley, which comprised most of Egypt even at this time in history. This also appears to be where the Hyksos' capital was, while they gradually conquered more of the area known at times as Egypt. I know a lot of y'all gonna be like, oh, just because they inhabited the same area don't mean anything. I know, it could just be a coincidence. Let's move on. The late Bronze Age was mainly one of Egyptian dominance in Canaan, although their power there was contested by the Hittites of Anatolia. The period was also marked by incursions of marauders called Habiru or Habiru, Egyptian Apiru, or Hebrew. So they saying during the late Bronze Age, that's when Canaan started to get invaded by these people called Habiru, or in Egyptian Apiru. The term was apparently applied by the Egyptians to other peoples or social groups who were of foreign origin. Many scholars feel that among the Habiru were the original Hebrews, or whom the later Israelites were only one branch or confederation. So that this term could not have been applied to the Canaanites because the Canaanites themselves were using it, and so were the Egyptians. Habiru, more accurately as Apiru, meaning dusty, dirty, or Sumerian or Akkadian, Habiru or Apiru, is a term used in 2nd millennium BCE texts throughout the Fertile Crescent for people variously described as rebels, outlaws, raiders, mercenaries, bowmen, servants, slaves, and laborers. Sure, it says slaves, but they were more so servants and laborers. And all of these words can be applied to the Hebrew people because they were rebels, outlaws, and raiders. And according to the Bible, they were also slaves and laborers. And I find it interesting that these different groups use similar words to describe this one group of people. That's the Egyptians, the Canaanites, the Sumerians, and the Akkadians, all using the word Habiru or Apiru to describe foreigners or outsiders. And remember, the word is etymologically related to Hebrew.